Do you know how to accurately describe your drawings or paintings? When we're learning a new skill in any field of endeavor, it's very important not only to understand all the elements that are involved, but also to understand the correct term so that we can accurately describe what we're doing. Hi, I'm Carrie Alves, and I'll teach you how to create beautiful and realistic portraits of the people that you care about. This tutorial is part of my free introductory course called Getting Started with Realistic Drawing. And this is where I'm teaching my students all the correct terminology that they need to know, not only to understand and look for certain elements in their drawings, but also how to communicate effectively about what they're doing. So let's take a look. Let's take a hard look at our reference image here. And I want you to become familiar with some terms. What we're going to be learning here are a number of things. One of them is a range of values. So when we say a range of values, what we mean is the lightest lights to the darkest darks, and all the various shades of gray that are in between. Value scales have just basically broken it down into sort of a series of steps that just make it easy for us to identify. So when we say a 2 value, we know that it's pretty light, or we say an 8 value, that it's pretty dark. We're going to talk about the quality of light. So in this particular case, the light is coming in from the right-hand side, and it hits here into a highlight area. And then we get into the light and halftone range. And this would be a light light and of course a darker light. Predominantly it's known as a halftone range. Then what we have is where the light begins with the shape, or what we call the form. In other words, the three-dimensionality of this particular object. When the light hits it, it will sort of get to a certain point and then it will spill off. But then the shape of the egg turns inward and it doesn't allow the light to hit it. We call that turning actually a form. So any form that has a three-dimensional aspect to it, we relate to that as form. And so when we talk about turning a form, we talk about how the light hits the shape of it, actually turns away from the light, and our job in realism is to be able to turn the form away from the light. And to be able to do that, you need to recognize how all these different values play off of each other to give that illusion. Where the light hits there, it then turns away from the light and hits the fabric right here. And because it's hitting there, some of that light will bounce back up. And you can see in here. And this is called reflective light. And you see reflective light in objects all the time. So highlight, halftone, reflective light. This whole area that's gray is referred to as shadow. And we have two different distinctions for shadows. This is the shadow within an object, and then there's a cast shadow, which is obviously the shadow that the object casts. But then reflective lights happen within a shadow. Then we have our dark darks within the shadow. And under here is the core shadow, which is the darkest area where absolutely no light is happening. And then as a shadow begins to dissipate out there, generally it will become a little bit lighter, and the edge of it, as it begins to fade off, is known as the penumbra. You'll also notice here in the middle of it where the light hits there and then ends, but then it comes up here and there's a little more light. In between there's usually a darker band, and that's the darkest part. That's where the light is hitting it the least. There's no light from the top and there's no light from the bottom. That's referred to as a terminator line. So this is some of the terminology that we're going to be dealing with. We're also going to be dealing with edge quality and the terminology that goes with that. Something like this is a hard edge, and that's really obvious. Something like this, you can see it. It's beginning to have a broken or a soft edge. Something like in here, where it's almost imperceptible. They begin to gradate so softly you can't really even tell. There's almost no edge per se. That's basically called a lost edge. Something like this, where you have two shades that are quite close, but there is obviously a distinction. That's called a found edge. And this is just a gradated edge. So these terms can also interrelate to each other. You can have a found edge as in, suddenly this edge is there, but it can also be turned a hard edge, but this can also be a found edge as well, where it's more sort of indistinguishable. The quality of these edges will also dictate your image is developed as well. As to how these edges transition into each other is really, really critical. And so this is the basic terminology that we're going to be dealing with as we move forward, and we're talking about all the different components and all the different aspects of the drawing. Well, I hope that helps, and thanks very much for listening. So if you'd like to develop the skills to draw beautiful and realistic drawings of the people that you care about, you can. Click on the Patreon link in the description below and find out how. Thanks very much for watching, and we'll see you in the studio. And remember, stay creative. This is your time to express yourself.